Greetings of light. Welcome to AGP November 2022. Take a moment to relax, settle down. If you have any audio issues, you can get my attention through the chat window. So as usual, what we'll be doing is starting with a period of meditation, and after that we'll have a chance to spend some time discussing several fascinating topics. But really, no matter what we're doing, see if you can be in that state of internalization and, more than anything else, tuning in to the vibration of beingness. Throughout the guided meditation, there will be pauses, much like the pauses you're experiencing right now. That's to allow us to listen to the silence. Because beingness is conveyed more eloquently through silence. So even as you hear my voice, pay attention to the silence, certainly between the words, but also the silence in the words. Oftentimes we are so fixated on the notion of time it's as if there's this pressure created by time. And this pressure can cause distortion in our inner space. It can prevent us from seeing what's really there. What you want to do is completely dissolve this idea of time. So imagine there's infinite amount of time. So there's no shortage of time. So you don't have to go somewhere and do something. Instead, we're here together for an indefinite amount of time. So we can relax. We can fully be with each other. We can fully be with ourselves. You can feel that space building up, the space where there is no pressure created by time. And for all of us here, as we look to raise our consciousness, we don't need the baggage created by time. So every moment can be a timeless moment. Every day can be an eternity. You can find yourself breathing a lot easier when there's no time. Notice how quickly you can go deep. notice that most of the worldly stuff is connected with time. If you take that away, it all falls apart. And that's good news. It's not bad news. It literally needs time to prop it up. And the whole structure around which we have built up these big castles and mansions, they all collapse. And that puts us really close to pure presence, pure awareness. It puts us in a place where we can sense light, feel light at profound levels. We can feel our own light nature, a higher aspect of our own being. And as we do that more and more, we really develop this refined taste for the sublime. And at the same time, we lose our taste for the relatively gross phenomena, gross experiences. It just naturally starts falling off. And greater levels of beauty and truth reveal themselves as we show up at these more refined levels. Consciousness is becoming more refined and elevated as this happens. So let's keep that intention for plumbing the depths of the ocean of stillness, so we can directly perceive higher frequencies of light, so we can know truth. So we can know essence. Through being. I know so many of us, we go very deep, very quickly. Right in the first 15 minutes, you can go so deep, as if you've been in a retreat for several days, meditating. You can go right there. Just like that. Into that place where literally time, space, identity, they are interrupted. And there is this portal into a dimension where all these ideas and concepts, they evaporate, and you literally cannot say anything, and you can find yourself in these states much more readily because we're sitting together with a very powerful common intention, a pure intention. So allow yourself to be consumed, taken over by the power of light, by the power of our coming together in this way to hang out with nothing but the highest intentions for our own highest potential, to explore that, to unfold that, to reveal that, and to share that with the world, with the collective, with creation itself. So let yourself be drawn into these profound states, and you can anytime let go of the part of you that might be trying hard to assemble a set of ideas, concepts that somehow are trying to make sense of what I'm saying. Instead, let it not make any sense. That's okay. What's more important is for you to directly experience that unknown, unspeakable, infinite. And so as that starts speaking to you, feel free to pay less attention to what I am saying. So we really kind of enlivened those higher possibilities in these last few minutes. And now we will start with our air practice. And you'll hear me use the timer to mark every 5 minutes. And after 20 minutes, we will pick up again with the guided meditation. So get settled in for the air practice. Notice the clarity and depth of your consciousness. Relax into this stillness. Don't feel that you need to be doing something. Free yourself from any idea that may be suggesting I am a person sitting and meditating. Let go of that idea that you are a person sitting at a particular place, a particular day and time. Instead, get in touch with your essence, with your light nature. As a being of light, you are vast, expansive, limitless. Not localized, not locked up in a container whose walls are made of space-time. Instead, you are this amazing, radiant being. And as all of us, as light beings coming together, let us now consciously locate ourselves in this plane of light. A higher plane where we're all sitting together in this pyramid. It's a vast pyramid made of light. And as we sit in it, the pyramid is amplifying our aspirations to be completely free, to fully realize and embody our infinite nature. To radiate light for all beings, for the benefit of everyone. In this pyramid of light, it's as if our vibration has a certain kind of intensity that keeps increasing, keeps building up. It increases the light within our being, strengthens our entire light anatomy. And you may feel that in various ways. Pinpricks, tingles, more electricity moving within your system. All happening beyond the understanding of the ordinary mind. But something you can intuit, you can feel, you can cognize it in certain ways. You may see it as more brilliant light, You may also be hearing it as a non-physical sound. But most importantly, as a light being, you can sense your essence much more clearly. Everything else has been dropped off. So you are in the direct presence of your own infinite nature. And that is simply awesome. The more you can feel it and know it without putting any labels, any description, anything at all, the better. Because all the labels, they get in the way. Instead, simply be and feel that subtle joy within your being, sense of release, sense of celebration. That's something you've been wanting and looking for is here, and it is truly magnificent. There is infinite light all around. Infinite space. infinite consciousness. Infinite existence. Everything is included in this infinite state, beyond states. And this makes a very deep impression on all aspects of your being, such that you can never be too far from it. Even when you step into the relative, this infinite light is shining brightly. At any moment you glance at it, you see, it's right there. It's as if this bright, brilliant light has been installed in every aspect of your being, every layer, every dimension, every corner of you. Is drinking this light and taking notice and coming to its own deep connection, understanding of infinity. So let infinity, let it into your being. Let it thoroughly permeate and infuse itself. And let this light bring within you a certain lightness, a certain buoyancy, certain clarity, certain transparency, certain radiance. So you can move as an infinite being of light, nothing less than that. So you can be blazing forth this light in every apparent relative reality. Now let's spend a couple of minutes in silence as we fully soak that in, make it our own. Let us now gently bring ourselves to a more grounded, more oriented in all levels, including the physical. You can certainly continue to stay in a meditative state and just simply be a little more conscious of the physical space around you. And I know some of us have gone off to the other end of the universe, and it can take some time to bring ourselves back. So take your time. We'll also take a short break now. And when we come back, we can talk a little more about the meditation, if anybody has something to share. And we can also tackle some of the topics we have for today. So let's take a 5-minute break. It's also a good time to drink some water. We'll see you all in 5 minutes. welcome back. And if you like, you can still keep that visual of us sitting together inside this pyramid of light. Even as we talk about things, and you'll notice some subtle effects of that. So let's take a moment to collect our thoughts. I'd be curious if anybody has anything to share from the meditation, any experience that you'd like to just share, or if you have any questions. Be sure to unmute yourself.
Toward the end of, or somewhere in a guided meditation, you spoke of a very powerful meditation. I'm just blown away. You spoke of that you may be experiencing some sensations, some buzzing and things. And it was at that point that I emerged. So I was not sleeping, but I was elsewhere, but I was here.
Uh-huh.
And I emerged to be aware enough of my physical, kind of the finite. And my body was buzzing. My legs were buzzing like crazy. I have a very comfortable chair, and I had to get out of it. And I laid down with my headphones to complete the guided meditation. I couldn't sit any longer.
Mm-hmm.
Just an observation.
Yeah.
Powerful meditation again. I'm not sure what you said, but I'm just way out there.
Yes. Yeah, I think we all have our own sort of versions of that, but thank you for sharing. I think our entire being picks up on these things. And then, of course, you may feel it in different ways. You may feel the intensity of light and electricity and energy in the body, in the subtle body, and in higher aspects. And it gives you, on the one hand, it gives you, a good confirmation. Hey, something's going on here. I'm not just there, off in la la land. It's something's going on, and sure enough, there's a lot going on. Thanks, Dave. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Hi, Suresh ji. I think the time aspect, which was mentioned in meditation and before that also,
Yes.
I could really see that it is not linear, or just an observation is that before the whole AGP for today started, I felt like the AGP had started long back, and like it was like it's not so obvious that it's like, for me it's like 6:30 to 9:30 or something like that. It probably around 4 a.m. and I think my being was picking up on that from before itself.
Yeah.
So it was just like really confusing for the mind to understand this, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, yeah, there's things, of course, we have the formal start time and stop time, but really, AGP in the container, you can think of it as a container that represents us together. It's a field, and that field is simply there anytime somebody wants to tune in and be in that field. And of course, usually when we have our gatherings or monthly sessions, there's, we usually think more about it and we're more intentional about it. And so it's certainly, you can feel it much more. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So just reading Cindy's sharing on the chat window. She says, powerful meditation also felt the need to keep adjusting my position. Yeah. Yeah. It really, it just keeps going. There's very high levels of electricity. It's like high voltage lines. And you start conducting as much as you can handle. And that's why long-term practice is very important, because it takes time to build these circuits that can handle that much electricity. And so the more you've built it, the more you have the capacity to handle the high voltage, the high current. And the more you can handle, the more it's actually extremely enjoyable, blissful, pleasurable. If the circuits are not quite built up, then it can get more uncomfortable. So, and that's fine. We just have to make sure we're doing daily practices, like river of light, for example, to build these circuits and to steadily strengthen them. Anyone else has any thoughts before we jump to other topics?
Just a small question. Could you just elaborate a little bit on the pyramid of light that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it's there is within this relative reality, within creation, there are structures, constructs, symbols which can essentially hold and amplify higher frequencies and higher consciousness. And so the pyramid of light is like that. It's got a specific structure, specific shape, and certain qualities. And for us, it basically, we can use it as a tool to essentially take us higher and higher, and also amplify the collective aspect, because it gives us a way to come together. And it's obviously not a physical thing, and yet it gives us that kind of sense of a way of connecting by being under the same roof, so to speak. And so the pyramid has its own qualities in terms of how it does its thing. And for us, what's more important is the effect. Rather than, the mechanics. And so you can experiment with it. That's really probably one of the things I would suggest, that when you meditate, you can choose to place yourself in this pyramid structure on a plane of light. And furthermore, you can, if you wish, you can visualize and imagine there's other people. You can, if you like, you can meditate with me sitting in that same pyramid. You can bring in any being that you feel would be helpful, that you resonate with. And we're going to talk about air today, and that's something actually I would add to that as well. When you're doing air practice, there's many aspects of air that go well beyond the actual techniques. And so I'll talk mostly about that today, rather than the nitty-gritties of the technique. So anyway, that's a little bit about the pyramid. And let's see. Looking at Dave's question. Please elaborate on developing circuits to handle the intense energies of our group meditation. I meditate regularly, yet each of our group meditations seems to be more powerful than the previous one, than the prior one. Am I missing something? No, you're not missing anything. It's the reason it's more powerful is that you are able to tap into and step into that greater possibility. So it gets more powerful because you can handle more power. And then of course you bump into some other level of like, okay, this is as much as I can handle. Okay, that's good. That's good, because that's probably much more than 6 months back, much more than a year back. And so it's ever increasing levels of power and ever increasing capacity to handle that. So I think that's what you're experiencing is just fine. In terms of developing circuits, as a core practice, again, I go back to air plus river of light. These two, and in fact, I would say river of light, you could do it more frequently. You can do it every day. You can do it twice a day. You can do more times, going up and down. And then there's, of course, many additional practices that I talk about in Just Be. And certainly, one of my favorites is the first technique in the advanced practices section. It's called abiding in magical infinity. And that has to do with sound and light and breath. And as you stay with sound and light and breath, you'll find it just keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher. And essentially, it'll take you as high as you can handle, and then you stay there as much as you can. And that'll definitely, doing that again and again and again, it'll develop your capacity. And other practices, of course, there's practices of letting go of and clearing things, and all those are going to help as well, because where we feel a lot of pressure is where there was probably some kind of obstruction. So as we proactively clear things up emotionally, energetically, then there's less hot spots, places where it's going to get really hot and very uncomfortable. So as those hot spots go away, you can actually feel more and more energy flowing within you, but it feels quite fine. Funny thing that it reminds me of, there was a person I knew, he was a electrical contractor. He used to, fix things, do the wiring in the house and all this kind of stuff that you expect an electrical guy to do, electrician. And of course, the one thing about him was he would not wear any gloves or insulating stuff, nor would he turn off the circuit breakers. He would touch live stuff, and he was fine. he could handle it. So he would just work on live circuits, which is generally not a good idea. And the shock, he was totally fine with the high voltage and high current. So it's just a funny thing, but you can see how that can be, with the kinds of electricity we're talking about here. So now let's switch gears, talk about air. And many of us have been practicing air for a while, some of us maybe for a few months. And while there's a lot to be said about the specifics of each technique, it's all pretty clearly laid out in the book, and I don't want to repeat all the details. Instead, I want to highlight a few things that I feel may not be, we may not be paying as much attention to them. So what are some of these things? So firstly, air, as you know, stands for awakening infinite radiance. And the name is significant. If you think about it for a moment, it's a set of techniques. It is not designed to make you great at any sort of concentration practice or make you great at meditation or give you superpowers or anything. It's designed to awaken you to your higher nature, to your infinite nature, and having directly awakened to it, realized it, to radiate it, to live it. So it's got a very specific intention, and this intention is very key, because if you align with that intention, you're going to unleash the payload that it carries. There's a vibrational payload inside air. So by practicing the technique and with high intention and alignment, you're going to tap into that gold. That it unleashes that. And that's really the point of air. It's not going through a set of mechanical things and doing it as precisely as possible. I mean, you do want to do the techniques correctly, but it's not about fixating on the details. So that's the important high-level goal of air. And so when you sit down to practice air, you want to actually consciously tune into light, tune into infinity, because that's the source of this technique. That's where this technique is coming from. So the more you tune in with light, tune in with infinity, you are actually going to get so much more power coming through during the practice. And of course, as I said previously, you can visualize yourself not necessarily just practicing alone, but with beings of light. If you like, with AGP, the entire AGP group with you, or if you like, you can visualize that you and I are sitting and practicing in this chamber of light. Whatever feels to you, that feels like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So the sequence of practices is very intentional. The 4 techniques that comprise air. It's taking you to subtler and subtler aspects of your being. So when you start with the balance technique, we start, as the word suggests, we want to balance the foundation. So the body is balanced, the breath is balanced, the energy systems are balanced, the brain is balanced. So this gives you like imagine you're going to climb up on something. You don't want to, the bottom of that structure to be wobbly. You want it to be stable, strong, so it supports you as you go higher. So the balance technique is what does that. And each of those things we can talk about a lot of aspects, like how it balances the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and right brain, left brain, the endocrine glands, the various energy channels, and so on and so forth. But really, that's a lot of it that is, it's just happening. We don't really need to get too bogged down with the mechanics. After balance, we are ready to ascend. So ascend is, like lifting off. It's going from, the lower levels of the atmosphere to the higher stratospheric levels. So liftoff takes you very quickly to thinner and thinner air, where as you get there, the gravity is less and less. It's exerting less pull on you. So you're essentially, the more you go deeper, the more you can go even deeper easily, if that makes sense. So as you go deep, the next level of depth is easier, and then the next level is even easier. So it's one of those things which you're gonna get really accelerate. You're gonna be accelerating into higher states of consciousness. And then the next technique in air is center. And this is where you're going to refine consciousness because you've transcended quite a bit. Now it's time to really get super subtle and refined. And you're also going to now step from an identification from a person, a being, to something undefined. That's in the centering. It's not just me, a person who's getting centered. It's me losing myself in the center so that I'm no longer this person sitting and meditating. So it's really changing the definition of who's going through this process. And then as you come out of center into the fourth technique, which is be, simply beingness or being, here of course you're not doing anything whatsoever. So now you have transcended, you have refined, and then you have dissolved your sense of identity. So there's really very little of anybody left. And so this is the time to really simply be in that high quality consciousness. It's pure beingness. Anything else would contaminate it. So we want to have that direct experience of pure beingness. So there's obviously very little that can be said about what am I doing there, because you're not doing anything. You're simply being. But unlike just a random person sitting and trying to be, where it feels like I'm just being lazy and not doing anything, now you've built up to that. You've transcended, you've refined your consciousness to such a degree that beingness, you really see what beingness is all about. It's something completely different than just sitting around staring at the wall. It's a very pure state. So air takes you there, of course, in just 20 minutes. And if you can do it twice a day, that's ideal. Because you will see how every single time it takes you, it transports you to a completely different place. And then you start trusting it and you start relaxing into it. So this is the next point I want to emphasize, which is throughout air, you want to be in this easy, effortless state. If you find yourself tightening up, efforting, then you are actually kind of working against the technique. You really want to really relax and feel like whatever's going on is okay. Normally we tighten up when we feel like, oh, I can't believe it's going off in this direction. I really need to push. And you want to get rid of that idea, because what's happening throughout air is our consciousness is getting purified. And how does it get purified? Anything that needs purification is kicked up. That's how it actually works. So anything that's kicked up, it's going to show up in your body or emotions or your mind or your energy field. And you've got to say, yes, this is great. Something got kicked up and now I'm worrying about XYZ. That needed to be kicked up because that needs purification. So don't turn that into something went wrong. It's actually working. So if you have any thought crossing your mind, nothing went wrong. If you have any strong emotion coming up, nothing went wrong. If your body suddenly feels some weird sensations, nothing went wrong. So all these are actually, think of it as oh, this is great. There's purification happening. I can see it. And I'm going to work with this thing by being easy with it. That's how you work with it. By being relaxed, easy, present, and very gently, always preferring whatever the object of focus is. So let's say you are in the middle of the center technique where you're noticing your breath. Then what happens is let's say, you get dragged into some thoughts and some series of thoughts happen. And then you suddenly realize, whoa, wait a minute, I'm doing the center technique. Let me go back to my breath. Go back very easily and gently. And you've done your job. So the fact that you got dragged into something, nothing's gone wrong. Gently bring yourself back. This is the process that's going to happen a zillion times. And if you add the additional judgment that something's wrong, something's not working, I'm a terrible meditator, I can't believe I'm still thinking of this issue from yesterday, all these things, you're making it difficult and worse. Not needed. Simply go back to whatever the point of focus is. And this is, like I said, it's going to happen again and again. And that's great because that means there's more stuff getting purified. So think of it as, oh, here's one more thing I managed to purify. This one more thing that came up. And one more thing. And one more thing. And so on and so forth. But always be easy, effortless in resuming the technique. This is huge. I mean, this is worth really paying attention to because invariably we have this way of getting into like a tight, striving mentality. So air, as I said earlier, is not a concentration exercise. So if you lose your concentration, it doesn't mean, oh, you really messed up. No, this is not a concentration exercise, so you didn't mess up. It's going to go as however it's going to go. So don't confuse this with failing at the technique. You're not failing. Now there's some additional things you can do to refine your abilities, and this becomes more interesting as you've done the air practice at least for a few months. And let's say you feel like today my emotions are a little like I'm really jittery and I'm feeling unsettled and I want to really settle these emotions a little bit. Then there's some subtle things you can do. For example, in the balance technique, you can have a certain ratio. I talk about it in the book. Inhale for 2 seconds, hold for 1 second, exhale 4 seconds, hold for 0 seconds. So in other words, your inhale 2 seconds is the exhale is twice that. So if you do this kind of thing, this is meant only as a temporary thing, okay? Not like to make this your regular air practice. But if you feel very jittery and very unsettled, you can do it this way and it'll settle things down. So inhale and then hold and then exhale for twice the amount of the inhale. So basically the exhale is getting stretched out. And in a minute or two, you will find things are significantly settling down. If you look at your heart rate variability, your brain waves, all of them, they start settling down. So that's like a simple tweak you could do only for times when you are feeling unsettled. It's not, again, it's not the core practice. It's one of those things you can try when you need that extra thing. And some people, if they feel like my concentration is, I need help with concentration, then there is a specific technique I talk about in the book, which I'll just summarize here, which is, if you notice, there's 4 phases to the breath, right? There's inhale, there's a pause after the inhale, there's the exhale, and then there's a pause after the exhale. So these are 4 phases. And you can abbreviate it as the letter I, then IP, and then E and EP. So inhale, inhale, pause, exhale, exhale, pause. So if you have these 4 letters, this is a quick way to do this. So you write on a piece of paper I, IP, E, EP. These are 4 columns. And then what happens is you're doing the practice. Let's say you're doing the center practice. So you're watching your breath. And pay attention to where you are. So you gotta be aware and say, okay, I'm inhaling, I'm pausing, I'm exhaling, I'm pausing. When you have a thought bubble up, it'll obviously suddenly bubble up. You don't know when it's going to bubble up. But soon as it bubbles up, your job is to see, where was I? Was I at that moment inhaling? Or was I in the pause after the inhale? Or was I exhaling? Or was I in the pause after the exhale? So as soon as you notice that, you've got to put a little tick mark on the piece of paper under the appropriate column. So if it came up in the inhale, then under the inhale column, put a little vertical line and go back to the center practice until the next thought or emotion comes up. And then you got to notice it, right? You got to catch where it's happening. So this, if you keep doing this, you will find that your concentration starts getting really sharp. And maybe I should say this. You can have a 5th column, which is a question mark, which means unknown. So there's inhale, inhale, pause, exhale, exhale, pause, and then question mark, meaning don't know, unknown. And as you're doing this particular practice, if you catch yourself thinking and you are like, I have no idea what phase I was in, then put a little vertical line in the question mark column. So this way you keep track of it. Do this for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you'll start really seeing what's going on. It'll really sharpen your concentration dramatically. So this is obviously not part of the air practice, but I'm telling you something that you can use in conjunction with the air practice, which is going to help you with the air practice. A couple other points, and then I'm going to see if there's any questions on this whole topic. A couple of things to keep in mind in terms of physical stuff is the position of the eyes. So the eyes, you want to keep checking time to time to see if the eyes are essentially drifting downwards. What you want to do is keep it looking towards the sky. And even though your eyes are closed, you are looking upwards, as if you're looking at the forehead from the inside. but you're not crossing your eyes. Okay, keep in mind, you're not crossing your eyes. You're looking at the point a little bit further away from you. So your eyes are relaxed and looking at a point a few feet away. The position of the eyes, the position of the tongue. The tongue, you want to actually let the tongue rest on the roof of the mouth. So you want to take the tip of the tongue, touch the roof, and let it rest there. So all these, you want to do it without holding any tension. These have implications for the internal energy circuits, and I won't get into that right now. Another thing I mentioned is you're not trying to be excessively concentrating hard with effort, right? What you're trying to do is be very relaxed. So if you find yourself in this state where you are ultra alert, ultra vigilant, then see if you can relax. So let's pause for a second. I want to grab a drink. I'll be right back. All right. So, those are the key points which are going to significantly enhance your practice of air. Let me see if there's any questions on anything I've talked about.
Suresh?
Yeah.
I have a question. Sometimes there are two things. One is sometimes when I'm in the second practice, the I am practice, it seems like I skip that and can go directly into the beingness. That depends whether I've been meditating before or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other question, second question is, and do these different pieces, if you skip them, do you need to come back, or how do you go about that? Then the second question is, sometimes when I'm being in the beingness phase, I feel, well, there's some kind of a sensation or some kind of what do you call it, sense, or something that feels like there are thoughts around, but even though you're not involved in the thoughts, they're like, it just seems like there's like this background of something pulling, even though it's very subtle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So to your first question, there might be days when we really want to spend more time in either center or beingness or whatever. And I would say, suddenly you can set aside time where you basically jump into whatever specific one of these practices or a couple of them that you want to spend more time on. That's perfectly fine. However, I would say the 20 minutes you keep for air, follow the sequence. So make sure you're doing the balance, then doing the ascent for 5 minutes, then the center for 5 minutes. So do it exactly that way, because it's like a clean sweep. There's things that would actually be addressed in, say, the ascent technique where you're repeating I am, which won't necessarily be addressed in others. So you really want that clear sweep of going from physical to non-physical. And so I would say the 20-minute you set aside for air, do it systematically. So even if you feel like jumping ahead, don't jump ahead. Do each one of them for the allocated time, and just do it as a discipline. And then, after you've done that, you could say, boy, I'd love to spend 15 minutes just with whatever, centering or being. Absolutely. There's nothing that says, you shouldn't do that. In fact, there are days when we have 45 minutes and we're like, how best can I do this? So if somebody has more time, I would say you could do 20 minutes of air, and then you can go back to, beingness or any of the other techniques you feel drawn to. Another way to do it is to actually take that 20-minute practice and turn it into 5 minutes for balance, 10 minutes for centering, 15 minutes. Let me repeat that. 5 minutes balance, 10 minutes ascend, 15 minutes centering, and then 20 minutes for being. So you can see you're adding 5 more minutes for every successive technique. So it expands more, but not uniformly. It is more emphasis on the latter techniques. So that's another way to do it. But that's fine. But I would still say make sure you're doing each one of the practices in the right sequence. So that's to your first question. Second question, you're asking about beingness, and if you feel this kind of some sort of tug, some sort of force, some pressure, so to speak. So beingness is not necessarily saying that there should be nothing going on. The beauty of beingness is anything can be going on, but you're abiding in this state of beingness. That's the key. So whatever there might be going on, obviously there could be somebody, who just started mowing the lawn. It's like, okay, now there's suddenly this sound. Okay, it's there. You just can't, there's nothing much you can do about it. Of course, that's external. But similarly, with internal, maybe there's somebody doing lawn mowing inside your head. And it's like, okay, all right, so why is this happening now? Well, it doesn't matter. Whatever's going on is going on, including thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations, anything. Anything is fine. And you could still be in beingness. So beingness doesn't negate anything. It allows everything. And it itself is not affected by it. So whatever it is you're feeling, the tug, as you described it, it's let it be there. There's nothing that says it shouldn't be there. Let it be there. It doesn't have to dislodge you from your state of beingness. You are still residing in beingness. And then there's this thing going on.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good questions. Any other comments or questions on air?
Suresh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have a brief question of you were speaking of purification, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that. Is purification something that happens naturally in the sense, or are we constantly accumulating things from maybe something we saw on our computer or going through the day? Is when you speak of purification, is it from more of our past and all that we're taking on from life? How much do we need to be aware, and maybe can we kind of support staying in a more purified state as opposed to constantly accumulating things from our day and through the finite or the relative?
Right. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so purification, and of course some of us might have connotations of that word which, come from different traditions. So it's a good thing to talk about and see what we mean here. Purification is something that's going on all the time, in the sense that for everybody really, experiences are forcing us to really look at what's real and what's not real. And it's also like it's always pushing us in some way. The experiences are always pushing us in some way. So that's why we feel sort of challenged in various ways with things that are happening. And so that's pushing us, actually. It's really purifying us. Now, the important thing is, even though the evolutionary process is constantly keeping the pressure on, taking us, in the direction of more purification, we have a very active role to play in it. So, in fact, we can resist it, and we can choose to be less aware, in which case the less purification is going to happen from a given situation, given event. And not only that, we can also actually muddy it more. So we can sort of go in the wrong direction, so to speak. We can actually confuse and make the system more impure by actively doing things that take us in that direction. So in fact, if we cooperate with the universal forces, it'll keep purifying us. But if we don't cooperate with it, we can either slow it down, or we can stop it, or we can even reverse it. So this is kind of the thing that's playing out for everybody. So to answer your question about, can we actively participate in it and sort of enhance it and make it faster and easier? Absolutely. That's a lot of what happens when you choose a path of conscious growth. When you choose to transform, you're essentially saying, I'm not going to fight it, and I'm going to cooperate with it. And what it's pushing me towards, I'm going to actually sort of proactively work on that. And that way, it doesn't have to keep pushing me. I'm going to really take care of that, making that shift. So then there's no need for somebody to be pushing me. So then actually life feels easier. That's the strange thing. This is the thing about discipline in general. When we sort of happily discipline ourselves, we can essentially have a much more pleasant existence. Because the pleasantness comes from the fact that before somebody pushes us, we've already taken care of things. So, Now, the discipline, unfortunately, can take many different. There's many flavors of discipline. So there can be a real tight, striving type A kind of discipline. That is actually not so sustainable, not so useful. It has many side effects. On the other hand, a kind of easy discipline, which may, to some people, may feel like, how could that be? We always think discipline means, it's going to be hard. That's not true. Discipline can be actually easy. You can make it easy and still be disciplined. I think that's the wise way to live. And if we are like that, then the purification is happening. Lots of purification is happening, and very easily. And on top of that, life itself will feel very basically smooth and enjoyable. So this is sort of, okay, this is a big picture kind of thing. We can get down to practices. I mean, there's practices that really purify certain aspects of our being. There's certainly techniques that purify our physical instrument. There's techniques that purify our energetic body. There's techniques that purify our light body. And so there's all these things, but all of them really, to simplify, I feel most folks are either unaware and unconscious, and so actively resisting. And then there's folks who are on some kind of spiritual journey, and they are actively working on some aspects. And I think the folks who really move the fastest and with great ease and grace are the ones who really understand the essence of what the underlying process is. That it's really taking us towards a really beautiful state of being, which is natural to us. So it's actually peeling away what's unnatural. And so once we really understand that, we actually start more actively dropping into this sort of natural state, because we got the hang of it. I think that is the sweet spot where we are like effortlessly, easily gliding into that natural state, which is what the universe wants for us. So there's no more of this pushing and pulling and all this kind of stuff. It's much more like, wow, yeah, that's what I want. And so you kind of glide into it. And I feel that's also where light starts really looking attractive. It really ushers in, I feel, a whole way of transformation, which is fundamentally not about struggle and striving and resisting and all these kinds of things. It's much more like everybody is on the same team, going in the same direction, and it's feeling good. So another way of putting it is, the more aware we are and the more aware we become, the more we can see all these kinds of things going on with purification. So every little thing actually is significant. Meaning, let's say we're on the computer. I think you kind of mentioned that as an example. So if you're on the computer, there is a million things you can do on the computer, right? You can, and I won't try to enumerate that, but we know there's so many things. There's so many things on the internet, there's so many apps, there's so many ways to connect, etc., etc. Clearly, there's some of them which are going to be more helping us become more aware, more clear. And then there's other things which are actually going to do just the opposite. It's going to muddy the waters. It's going to make us more confused. It's going to get us more entangled in a relative reality. And we even know that. But that's the key. When we know that, are we going to still go in that direction? So maybe it's a Saturday evening and we're like, yeah, I feel like watching a movie. Okay, but there's a million movies. And there's certainly ways to get more entangled and ways to get less entangled. So that's just one choice, obviously. But literally everything we do, everything we say, everything we read, everything we, how we deal with people, all these things, there's a range of choices, some of which are taking us towards more awareness, more clarity, more purification. And as we develop our sensitivity, we have a better idea what that is actually. Because initially we might say, well, I don't know whether this is going to make me. Actually, it becomes very clear at some point what's taking you in a direction of greater clarity, greater purification, and which one is not. We're pretty wise that way. We really know, but sometimes we just fool ourselves. That's where we get into trouble. We think we can get away, or we think we can fool ourselves, but there's just no way. There's no way you can fool the system. So everything is gonna make us, clearer, brighter, or not. So let me pause there. Hopefully that's helps. And if there's a follow-up question from anybody or a comment, please jump in.
Hi, Suresh. Prabhakar here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just talked about the advanced technique that we can keep the tip of the tongue on the top palate, looking at the sky. But don't you think that's going to add a little bit of effort in the initial stage for the process, which has to be effortless?
Initially, you're right. It can feel like that, and what I would suggest is, if it's feeling like, oh boy, that really adds a lot of strain in my eyes, in my face, in my head, it's really, then I would say just gently go in that direction. So don't go to the max position, just a little bit in that direction so that it's not feeling like too much effort. If it's feeling like too much effort, you've already gone too far. So just gently move in that direction as far as you can. Don't feel like there's an ideal position and so I got to be there. With the tongue, for example, if you feel that always causes tension, just keep that position when you are doing miscellaneous things. For example, you may be you're writing an email. You can practice having the tongue, parked at the top of the mouth on the ceiling, and then you're doing your email. Just practice it that way, other than outside of meditation, and you will slowly develop the ability to do that with ease. It can take time. It can take a few months, few years, and so let it be a gentle move in that direction.
Okay, Suresh. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Suresh, back to purification. I have a question about not accumulating more. So, for example, do you have a practice every day where you go through and say, okay, I didn't process this, or, this is still, I'll just quote very briefly. Osho said something like where he does not go to sleep with any psychological problems or whatever, instability. So I was wondering, is there something that you practice or you could recommend that before you go to bed or, like kind of rest for the day to go through and kind of clear things out?
Well, I know I've heard a variation of what you said, which is I've heard in the context of relationships, people talking about how, a couple, you don't want to go to sleep with this unresolved argument or issue hanging on your head. You always talk until it's resolved and then go to sleep. So it's, of course, it's not exactly what you're asking, but it's something on a personal level. I think it's a good idea. Increasingly, how I see it, and this is going to look different for everybody, but what happens is you just you can do a broad clearing of anything and everything that's there, and so you don't have to essentially get into a kind of a analysis of what's left over, but you can release anything and everything that's still floating around. And I would highly recommend that, actually. That way, you made a conscious attempt to release. Sometimes you don't even need to know what it is you're releasing. I think actually when you get sort of into deeper levels of consciousness, it's pretty hard to say what a specific thing is or where it came from. All you know is there's something there. And it's like, okay, that's all you need to know. That's the beauty of some of these release techniques, which are based on consciousness and light, where there's no need to get into any kind of specific details. So as long as you can feel like, yeah, there's something there, or even if you want to just do a broad release and say anything that's floating around, I want to release it into the light. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing to do. I mean, if you do like a meditation practice in the evening before you sleep, I mean, that's kind of going to happen. But you can make it a little more intentional.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Suresh, is there any recommended timings for the air practice that you have?
I would say basically once morning, once evening. And for every one of us, I think that window where we can practice it conveniently is going to be a little different. So I'm not too stringent on when exactly that is. For some people, it'll be as soon as they wake up, wash their face, you can do it right then. For some other people, it's like a little bit later, maybe take a shower and then sit down for the practice. So you depending on your own sort of personal preference and schedule, I mean, I think it's fine whenever you can find that window of time early in the day. And similarly at night, again, I'm generally pretty flexible. I feel like, some might prefer to do it before dinner. Great. If you do it after dinner, that's also fine, obviously, but you don't want to do it right after dinner. So you want to keep some time so that, the food is mostly digested and then you do your practice. So pretty flexible, I would say. Just find a slot that you can work with easily and that you can, you really do it every day.
Right. Thanks for that. And one more thing on the, so when I practice, let's say twice a day for a while, I feel this energy buildup, which kind of becomes almost like hard to handle in a way where if I'm not too careful with it, I kind of like spill it out in a very big way somewhere other, in maybe at work or when I'm dealing with family or something like that. So it was almost like, okay, let's not build up energy so quickly. And so I'm still like learning to like glide. It's not ever since light came into the picture, it's been much easier. But I still would say I'm still there, like struggling to gather that and maintain that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So some things that help are pretty simple, actually. So after you're done with the air practice, you don't want to immediately get up and do whatever. Okay. So it might feel like, well, I'm done now. Okay. Time to actually give yourself 2 to 3 minutes to just sit with eyes open, and you're still right there, wherever you meditated, and you're taking 2 to 3 minutes just to look around, just readjusting, recalibrating, and that 2 to 3 minutes is going to let that shift be a lot smoother. If that hasn't happened smoothly and then you step into activities, there could be a jarring interaction downstream, because there's a sort of there's a spike of energy that's going to show up in some weird way. So you want to sort of dampen that just by sitting around for a few minutes after finishing air. And that'll kind of balance it out. And if you can, of course, it's nice to step outside, get some fresh air, a lot of liquids, these types of things will help. So literally keeping a minute or two gap here and there is going to help a lot. So if you were to say you drive to work, let's say, after you drive, reach work, park the car, don't immediately go into your office. Just spend an extra minute just sitting in the car. Okay. That one extra minute is a big deal. Okay. So that's obviously just an example, but that could look, it could look different for each one of us. But a minute here, a minute there. Or it could be something like you reach work or wherever. You go use the restroom, spend an extra 30 seconds, okay, in the restroom, and that'll help, these transitions sort of settle down. So if you keep doing these things, I think that'll help. River of Light helps. And yeah, I mean, you'll find your own sort of adjustments that help you, whether it's, certain foods or certain people or whatever. So you can make adjustments as you see fit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Intuitively, there is some inclinations towards certain foods and like certain types of atmospheres to be in to kind of settle down with this. But yeah, thanks for. I mean, otherwise it feels like the 1 minutes, if not taken, it feels like you can recede back quite quickly from all the.
Right. So essentially what's going on is, with the practice, we have some more access to refined states, but there's integration that needs to happen. And the integration, when it happens a little more smoothly and gradually, it's totally fine. But if it happens in a jerky way, then it doesn't feel good to you, and it won't feel good to probably somebody else around you. So we don't want this jerky integration. Essentially, we're trying to smoothen the integration. Integration has to happen, but it can be relatively smooth and drama-free.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good points, good questions, very practical stuff, which is very important. think we're ready, more than ready for the one-liners now. Then we can come back to anything else people have. And I know there's also the topic of dreams, which we may touch on. So let's see how far we go. All right, so now is the time to sit back. But before sitting back, we want to unmute. So, all right, this is probably something popped up on your screen. So here we unmute ourselves so we can hear each other laughing our heads off. So these are the one-liners for this month, and the topic is dogs.
Yay.
So here we go. First one is from Ann Landers. Don't accept your dog's admiration as conclusive evidence that you are wonderful. Jennifer Neal. Who knew that dog saliva can mend a broken heart?
Yeah.
Mark Twain. If you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, he will not bite you. That is the principal difference between a dog and a man. As usual, Mark Twain has a very unusual way of saying things. Josh Grogan. We could have bought a small yacht with what we spent on our dog and all the things he destroyed. Then again, how many yachts wait by the door all day for your return? Emily Dickinson. Dogs are better than human beings because they know but do not tell. Milan Kundera. Dogs are our link to paradise. They don't know evil or jealousy or discontent. Yeah, something to learn from. Agatha Christie. Dogs are wise. They crawl away into a quiet corner and lick their wounds and do not rejoin the world until they are whole once more. Yeah, they're good at doing that letting go thing.
Yeah.
You can see them working on it, right? That's pretty interesting. Dave Barry. You can say any foolish thing to a dog, and the dog will give you a look that says, "Wow, you're right. I never would have thought of that." Helen Thompson. A well-trained dog will make no attempt to share your lunch. He will just make you feel so guilty that you cannot enjoy it. Andy Rooney. The average dog is a nicer person than the average person. Joe Weinstein. My dog is worried about the economy because Alpo is up $3 a can. That's almost $21 in dog money. The next bunch are unknown. If your dog is fat, you aren't getting enough exercise. No home decor is complete without dog hair.
Oh.
The best therapist has fur and 4 legs.
Yeah.
Without my dog, my wallet would be full, my house would be clean, but my heart would be empty. Nothing in the world is friendlier than a pet dog. Every snack you make, every meal you bake, every bite you take, I'll be watching you.
Oh my God.
What I like most about people is their dogs. I don't care. I don't care who dies in the movie, as long as the dog lives. Marilyn Monroe. Dogs never bite me, just humans. And finally, Groucho Marx. Outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. So those are the one-liners for today. Hopefully making you feel warm and fuzzy. All the dog stuff. So I'm curious, do more people have cats than dogs, or vice versa?
Yeah,
We
I was
have
going to
both.
say Jade was sitting here not really pleased about your topic tonight. But I don't know, it's the resident cat of AGP. And I was going to say earlier, during the meditation, one point she was all over the phone and rubbing on the phone and totally connected with you, Suresh, as she does. She's always connected with Suresh when we do this. And then during this, she was just looking at me like, what is he doing?
How can things go so wrong, right? Why are we talking about dogs of all the things? Yeah.
Now I have 3 cats and 3 dogs.
Oh my. Wow. Okay.
Half an acre helps. So
Yes.
There's
that's
also
cool.
this thing going on that dogs are the new children and plants are the new pets,
Ah, interesting.
Good one.
Interesting. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I feel like, my own biased informal impression is some time back, I'm talking decades back, mostly, dogs were more popular as pets. But I think more and more cats are taking over.
Maintenance-wise, I think cats are way easier. So I think a lot of people for that also. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with the maintenance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot easier to have a cat. Well, I'm sure some people will disagree. Cats can be demanding too, but
Yeah, I was just going to say, hey,
Yeah.
depends on the cat.
Right, depends on the cat. But dogs are, in certain obvious ways, at the very least, most of the people I see on my evening walk, very few of them are like me, just walking for the sake of the walk. They're walking mostly for their dogs. So the dogs, one thing is you got to take them for the walk. And cats, I'm discovering new things all the time, like on my walks. There are cats which actually take themselves on a walk. I never thought that I would see that. There's at least a couple of cats who I meet who are basically walking themselves and they know how to go back. And they're not apparently afraid of dogs they are going to run into along the way. So that's a new thing for me.
Well, you can find cats on leashes in Central Park.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. The closest I've seen here is, the cats with the owners, but even that is not very common. But certainly I haven't seen cats on leashes.
We pull them into our human world.
Yeah.
It's just really helpful to be with them, to listen, to observe, just to be. And there's so much to be
Totally
learned or experienced. They're there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the coolest thing. If you ever feel confused, what is this being thing? It's hard to describe, etc. Well, just hang out with your cat, your dog, your horse. It's it's giving you nature is absolutely the best example of
It's
what being is.
less commitment than say a baby,
Right.
but babies are the same. It's
Yeah.
yeah, you get real, and if you're not real, it becomes obvious.
Yeah.
Kids cry, cats and dogs get wary. So yeah. Anyways,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, human beings, you can see glimpses, and certainly with babies, lots of beingness and just amazing stuff. But yeah, for those of us with pets, and sometimes, even with kids, well, kids grow up, but pets sometimes they're more time with us than kids. And so literally quality and quantity time, sometimes it's with the pets.
So the beingness part of babies, I've been noticing very often these days. Like, you could see that they're literally dipped in infinity, just and it's you can see that it brings the entire family into, like, infuses light into the family
Yeah.
sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it really, all these things we talk about, beingness, light, and the sense of unity and essence, and how nothing is needed to be in that state. I think babies exemplify that because they don't have a long resume of accomplishments. All they are is, here I am, naked and wet, but it's like, there's so much there, that's all beingness, essence, joy. So it tells us, look, that's possible. Don't get caught up in your stuff.
Suresh, as you say that, it reminds me of the bare metal, it's like
Yeah.
the baby is just bare metal.
Right. That's right. And what Jasmine is referring to is a couple of retreats back, we talked about this idea of bare metal, which comes from, at least for me, it comes from semiconductor and electronics, where if you look at a microchip fabrication, there's many layers that are overlaid on each other, and these are of course microns, right? They're microns wide, and they form, with these layers, they form transistors and resistors and capacitors and so forth, and circuits. But before you get into all these layers, even if you've seen like a printed circuit board, there is this bare metal, right? With nothing piled on top of it. And that bare metal is the analog for our state of pure beingness. So when we haven't gotten all sort of complicated with our thoughts, emotions, personality, identity, etc., what's there in us as bare metal is this state of beingness, pure beingness. And we go there every night, right? I mean, when we go back to deep sleep at night, that's where we are. All this identity is thrown out. So we are experiencing that every day. And of course, in our meditations too, much more consciously in the meditation. But yeah, that's, bare metal. So, Nursing Vanessa has 2 cats. Wow. A lot of folks have many cats, not just one. Cool. Now, I want to talk a little bit about dreams before we wrap up. I'm going to mute everyone just in case there's background noise. So please remember to unmute yourself if you want to say something. So here, okay, so I muted everyone. Dreams, there's a lot to say about dreams, and so I'm going to say a few things, but before that, if there's some topic or question that anybody has, it doesn't have to be about what we talked about today, but something that's relevant to you, that's something happening in your life that you feel like, how does one deal with this? Feel free to bring it up. I want to make sure we talk about things.
Suresh, this is Jasmine again.
Yeah.
So, you know, dreams are a big topic. I think what I would like a big topic. So if it doesn't get covered today, it can be covered next time, which is about time. And you spoke about it a little bit today, but it's like, there are instances specifically in the beingness state, there is no time, right? It's just not experienced in a physical, in a time bound, in a box kind of way.
Yes.
But, and you also hear about, you know, I mean, like, we talk about getting lost in movies, like time bending, quantum physics, quantum mechanics. There's really no time. There's no hole. There's no this. There's no that. So, you know, if just bringing it up just because we did talk about it earlier, and I do want to explore this. How do you exist in a physical reality without being constrained by time and space?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, so yeah, well, I've noted it down as a topic. There's also another topic that was suggested was related to astral projection, stepping into other dimensions. Both are fascinating topics. So we will probably touch on that next time. And because this dream thing is actually from a few months back, so I want to at least touch on that a little bit. And even then, I don't think we'll really get through everything. So at least let me talk about a few things, hopefully open up that topic for your own exploration. But thanks for suggesting that topic, Jasmine. So dreams, there's of course lucid dreams, but somebody had asked, I think, a question last month, which we didn't get to. Is it just about dreams and dream interpretation and understanding dreams, and whether that is something useful, and if so, how does one go about it? So that was a question I wanted to talk about before we get into lucid dreams. So sometimes, of course, dreams have some very interesting and fascinating content, and it can be very intriguing, especially if we remember it and we ponder about it. For the most part, I would say dreams are essentially content in our consciousness that is asking for some attention, but then it's showing up in the dream in a very creative way. Because in a dream, there's fewer constraints. So you can have flying cars, you can have pink elephants, you can have anything you want. So there's much more range of things that can appear in a dream. And of course, as we're talking about time can also be highly elastic in a dream. So the consciousness can use dreams to present us with content that serves a purpose, actually. So it's almost like there is a internal movie director, producer who custom designs a movie for us and says, instead of just tuning in and picking a movie on Netflix, here's a movie that's created for you that's going to have some special significance. And so dreams are pretty interesting in that way. They're certainly not arbitrary, random things. The thing which is I want to really emphasize is that when we are in the dream and we are having obviously a response to the dream as the dream is playing out, that itself is the key. So there's already things happening in the dream through our participation and reactions to the dream. In other words, the waking up in the morning, thinking about the dream, journaling the dream, analyzing the dream, looking at the dream symbols, all that stuff, that's not the main thing. Dream symbology and interpretation to me is very secondary and not really important. So we don't want to get too wrapped up in, what does that flying unicorn really represent that I saw last night in my dream? It's doesn't matter. In the dream you saw it, you felt something. That's the key. You felt something, that it evoked some response from within you, just like that. You didn't have to go read a book. That is why the dream is already doing its job. It doesn't expect you to analyze it correctly and interpret it correctly. So because of that, I would say don't spend a lot of time pondering about what does the dream mean? What does this mean? It doesn't mean anything in that way. You may be trying to distill it all down to something that's happening in your life. That's what we tend to do. We tend to be like, this is what's going on, so I wonder if the dream is telling me blah blah blah. It's not about that. It's really trying to, going back to a previous topic, purify your consciousness. That's really the point of it. It's trying to purify your consciousness. So, for example, if something happened in the previous day, previous week, previous year, previous lifetime, an emotion that didn't quite get fully processed, fully dealt with, it's still sitting in your consciousness, right? It's still sitting somewhere. So a dream can totally grab that unfinished business, so to speak, there's an energy residue. It can pull that out, cook up a story, basically create a movie and play it out. And in the movie, there's something completely, like nothing related to the original event, but it's something playing out, but it's just going to push some buttons in you. It's going to evoke the same response that's needed to dissolve that residue. So you can see how this is going on. So it's giving you another chance to deal with it. And effectively, what are you doing? You're purifying your consciousness. You cleared up something. And if you start looking at the content of the dream, you really can't figure it out. It's the content is basically cooked up. The key is it's trying to evoke a certain state in you. And so you're going to go through that and as you go through the dream. The more aware you are, the better it is. So that's what I have to say about dream interpretation. Basically, don't spend a lot of time interpreting dreams. Instead, spend more time being more aware in dreams. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions or comments on that.
Hi, Suresh. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes I wonder, is a dreamless sleep better than a sleep that is full of dreams, or does a dreamless sleep signify unawareness?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So mostly I would say, a lot of us, we have dreams, we may or may not remember it. So some folks tend to remember it more than others. And so that's another variable that can make us feel like, I don't have a whole lot of dreams. You may be having dreams, but it's more abstract or more, you just don't remember. But the key point is the director and producer of the dreams is very cognizant of what all material is there that needs to be kind of processed. So because of that, we don't particularly need to concern ourselves with that. So there's no, I wouldn't make a blanket statement, it's good to have a lot of dreams, or it's good to not have dreams. Whatever is there is there. That's already optimized for you. So work with that.
I see. And one follow-up question on that. I think you answered it, but still just to clarify. So should we take dreams as a sign to work on something like in the real life? Like if there are like recurring dreams or even like a single dream about a certain thing, should we treat it as like a precognition or like a feedback for us to pay attention to in our real life too?
Interesting. So specific dreams, I would not fixate on that. But if you notice a recurring theme, then I would pay attention to what that is. It may be drawing attention to not necessarily what path to choose or something like that, but it could be like, here's some area you want to focus on proactively in your waking state.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some clues that way. For example, I would say if you, for example, the dreams consistently bring up a certain emotion. Let's say the dreams always leave me really angry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's interesting. That's pretty interesting. That it seems like there's some suppressed anger within me which is playing out a lot in my dream. It ends up being something happens in the dream, I'm really angry at somebody or something, or frustrated. So that's giving me a clue that in my waking state, I want to be more aware of these emotions. And as I become more aware, maybe release them, feel them and release them. Usually we're suppressing them because we don't like feeling those emotions. So we want to do the reverse. We want to feel them and proactively release them. So I would say those kinds of things are more significant than sometimes we try to make it very specific. Generally, that's not the case. Once in a very long time, you may have a very significant, vivid dream, which in fact doesn't even feel like a dream. It's as if it happened yesterday. It's like that. Now, there could be something going on there, but it's not like the typical dream, right? Sometimes we may have a vivid dream. I'll give you two examples of that kind of thing. We can have a vivid dream where we're visited by somebody who passed away a while back. And they show up in the dream and they say whatever they say. They express their love, and maybe they say, I'm fine, I'm happy to see you're doing well, etc. So next day morning we may wake up and it can feel so clear and vivid, like we actually met that person. And to me, that was not a typical dream where conscious, subconscious material was being used to create a storyline. This is a non-physical being using the dream state to enter your consciousness to connect, because normally in the waking state we are kind of very caught up. We're like tight and caught up, and we kind of have this wall around us. So we don't let in information from non-physical dimensions to get through. But in the dream state, we are a little more relaxed. We have let go of our typical belief system. So there's more openness. And so in that openness, there's an opportunity for other dimensions to interface with our consciousness. And so for us, we feel like, oh, that was a dream. But actually, it just looked like a dream. It was almost like it is a real thing that looks like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's example number one. Example number two is, again, a non-physical being, but this time, let's say, an extremely advanced, evolved being of light can show up in your dream, and you can totally feel their sort of how brilliant they are, how bright. It's like it's really happening, basically. And you can feel essentially you could say their blessings and whatever they say to you, which could be something very simple but very powerful. You can feel that thing is like it's real. It's not just something made up in a dream. So next day you do feel that it's a different kind of dream. So these dreams are sort of exceptional. They are not your average dream. And that kind of represents to me dreams where we have stepped outside of this physical layer, physical dimension, and stepped into something else. And that can actually happen in lucid dreams too. And I know this is not exactly what you're asking, but since we're on the topic, lucid dreams, you can have lucid dreams where you're in your bubble and you have some dream. It's a movie and you are awake and clear, so it's lucid. But you can also have lucid dreams which overlaps with astral travel. So the dream turns into your traveling on other dimensions and coming back. So it's in fact, somebody had asked this question, I think, on some interview I did recently. What is the overlap, or are they the same thing, or are they different? So I'm just making a point that this can happen in lucid dreams too. Yeah, so that's a few things to think about. I know that probably brings up 25 other questions, but let me just pause there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Suresh.
Yeah.
Suresh, yeah, I remember this point from the interview that you did, and so the astral travel part, felt like it was more earth travel, not some other plane, where the the subtle body kind of comes out or becomes aware of itself,
Yeah.
and the energy is much higher. It's like a high energy place,
Mhm.
and in that space, this movie, the kind of unprocessed material plays out, and it's kind of confusing and very distorting. And but yeah, I could see that there was a moment when I'm really calm. It was going with the flow. It was very intuitive. But when the panic kicks in of sorts, it all starts kind of tumbling down, and I could get back to the body.
Yeah. 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 So, the thing is, if you have a dream or a lucid dream where you have stepped into the astral, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to have some very, um, you know, interaction with light. Because in the astral, you can step into many, many layers of the astral. So it could be a very mundane astral journey, or it could go to the higher planes of light. So astral by itself, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean it's something, ooh, that's so cool. It could it could be it could be something, or it could be not terribly useful. So it just, yeah, it varies a lot. So on the topic of lucid dreams, which we've talked about, some of you know we've talked about it in previous classes, previous AGPs. There's always new interest and new material. Since we're running out of time, I just want to talk about one particular thing today, and probably that's all we'll have time for. And that thing is how, let's say I do manage to get lucid and I'm having lucid dreams. What's the big deal? What can I do in a lucid dream? Why is that interesting? So lucid dreams in general, if you look at the world outside, there's lucid dreams are talked about in various ways. For some people, it's like a cool, fun thing to do. It's just like some other hobby. Instead of skiing, you have lucid dreams, and that's fine. But I think to me, what is most interesting is a specific use of lucid dreams, specifically for exploring higher states of consciousness, specifically for growth, specifically for transformation. That to me is really the reason I talk about it, because it's really not the typical coverage of lucid dreams out there. So given that, we might, if we were to ask, what is it I can do in a lucid dream that's a big deal for me as a seeker? Well, here's a few things. So in the lucid dream, you have, for example, you can do a range of things that you might consider spiritual practices. So for two examples, you can meditate and do air practice. You can do river of light in your lucid dream. And there is a subtle difference. When you do it in a lucid dream, the physicality is not getting in the way, because the physicality has been kind of like dissolved. Because in the dreamscape, you're not like burdened by your heart and the lungs pumping blood and all these things. It's like your body in the dream state it can do anything. It can fly. It's just free, right? So because it's free, you sit down and do air practice or river of light. The practice is so much more powerful. It's like supercharged. that's the really cool thing, because there's your pure intention to practice, there's the practice, and there's nothing getting in the way. So when there's nothing getting in the way, you see the full power unleashed of the practice. And of course, your consciousness benefits from that, because it's the same consciousness. Who you are, your consciousness as a waking state, and your consciousness in the dream state. Ultimately, it's the same consciousness. So in the dream state, there is fluidity, there's no inertia, and also there's an elastic sense of time, right? You can easily sit for indefinitely. So you can have an air practice that I'm just going to make this a little ridiculous, but just to make a point, you can have an air practice where instead of 5 minutes for each technique, you can do 5 years of balance, 5 years of ascent, 5 years of center, 5 years of beingness. You've done now 20 years of air practice. But in the dream state, it's obviously 20 years can happen in 20 minutes. In the wall clock time, 20 minutes. But internally, it's 20 years. So you can see how things can be used to your advantage. Some of you, if you practice with beads, right? You can have a mala, a set of beads, 108 beads, where you chant some sacred chant, some mantra. So this mantra you repeat, right? That's the waking practice called japa. Now imagine doing this in the lucid dream. In the lucid dream, you can be repeating this sacred sound, syllables, and you can do 10 of them, 10,000 of them, 10 million of them. Wow. Imagine the amount of purification of consciousness you can get from that practice, all in just one night. So, in other words, spiritual practices can take on a whole different level of intensity, power, and magnitude in lucid dreams. Take another example, forgiveness. You in the waking state, you really try to forgive someone. You really let go of that, whatever that hurt is, whatever that happened. Maybe you do soul harmonization practice, which is in Just Be, in case you're not familiar with that, which is a great way to clean up the energy between you and another person or group of people. You will find it in the I think it's in the advanced practices chapter of Just Be. So soul harmonization you can do in your lucid dream. Very powerful. So you can see where I'm going. All these practices can be significantly amped up. And of course, you get the benefits of that. Your consciousness gets the benefit of that. Along those lines, one more thing is, if you have beings that you have a sort of some devotion, some connection, some resonance with, and I'm talking about beings who are like super high states of consciousness, who you might consider, great saints, people like that. You can hang out with them. So great beings of light, you can connect with them, hang out with them in the lucid dream, and it's not just an imaginary thing. You're actually hanging out with them, and that is tremendously beneficial. I mean, if you just, that's the, when you are with a being of high consciousness, if you just spend time with them, you're going to get a lot from that association. There's not a whole lot of chit chat that needs to happen. You can just be with them. And it's just tremendously beneficial. I mean, huge. So guess what? That you could totally do that in the lucid dream. You know, your favorite high being. You can hang out with them. And of course, you know, you want to have high intentions. You're not just, you know, not just doing it for any other reason. It's really for good reasons. You can see how this can just, you know, this is, I'm just painting, you know, the picture with a few of my favorite things, but really that's just kind of opening the door, as you can see. You could take whatever practice you love to do. Maybe you like being out in nature, right? You like being, you know, sitting in this pristine environment, you know, beautiful mountains, beautiful landscape, just perfect lighting, the stream flowing, temperature is perfect, there's wildlife around you. Imagine hanging out in that kind of space. I mean, you don't have to drive 1,000 miles, go to a national park and all these things. You can have that tonight in your lucid dream. And that is beautiful, right? It's very helpful because, again, like I said, nature shows us what beingness is all about, and it heals you, it nurtures you. It's just amazing. So you could just be in nature and you can define it just the way you like it, right? That's the beauty. Other things you can do to kind of complete that story is just looking at the chat here, how to remember to practice in the lucid dream. Yeah, so that has to do with how to really get into the lucid dream state, and with sufficient awareness that one can even go in these directions. And so that we'll come back to that. Partly why I'm saying that is we have, in previous AGPs, we've talked about it, but I will try to recap it in our next AGP, because it's a little topic in itself. How do you cultivate lucid dreams? So going back to what are the cool things you could do in lucid dream as a seeker, if you have desires, and I know nobody here has any desires, but if you happen to, that you feel like this is really a strong desire coming from within me. And sometimes it could be like, it can take many different types of shapes. There are, you know, desires for experiences. There are desires for attainments. There could be like, I want to be very successful in business. Okay, that's a desire. Or I would love to have this beautiful, wonderful relationship. And so that's a desire. Or I'd love to eat tasty foods. That's a desire. Or you can see there's a range of desires one might have. What can happen is sometimes some of these desires we can address it in some way. Sometimes it's pretty expensive if we choose to hang on to a desire and want to manifest it on the physical plane. Because the physical plane has a lot of density and inertia, and it could take a long time to make that desire happen. And it could be a good desire too, like, I mean, a desire to help people. It's not just, desires are bad or anything, but at the end of the day, desires can actually get in the way, because they essentially can have us invest a lot of time, energy in a direction that gets us more entangled in relative reality. So because of that, desires, we have to be very careful. And all that is to say that there is going to be a class of desires which can, in a lucid dream, be unfolded. And sort of, you could say, what I mean is, you can sort of manifest it energetically. And you feel the sense of, got it, now I'm satisfied, done, release it. So through the process of lucid dream, you've essentially gone from desire to no desire, because that desire has been satisfied. But it didn't have to be satisfied on the physical plane. So there's a class of desires where you can do this thing and it'll save you a lot of trouble, because you don't have to work and chase these things in the physical plane, on the physical plane. So that is, again, this is something to be used with discretion and discrimination. It's not just anything and everything. But it is a legitimate way to skillfully work with certain kinds of desires. Okay, so that gives you a sense of why lucid dreams can be a pretty useful tool for us. And of course, for some of you who are new to lucid dreams, you might be like, yeah, I'm sold. How do I make it happen? How do I make these lucid dreams happen? Well, we'll talk about it. And I think Jasmine has a reference for us. Yeah, there's also there's a previous AGP. Now, again, if you've been with AGP for some time, this could be like a while back, 6 months back or something like that. But you can go back and listen to that if you were in AGP at that time. Now, of course, there's lucid dreams. There's any number of books and videos, and the thing is, everybody's coming from their own perspective. So all I would say is, be just be careful, which source is giving you that information, because it can be, like I said, it can be coming from different points of view, different levels of consciousness. But the one thing I will tell you about lucid dreams or inducing lucid dreams is, if you do long meditations, you're going to have lucid dreams right away. This is what I've seen time and time again. So if you have a day when you do a long meditation, by long meditation I mean 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7, 8 hours, something like that. If you do that night itself, you are very likely to have a lucid dream. Because the long meditation has really built up a certain kind of momentum where a high degree of awareness has been created in the daytime. And when you go to sleep, that high degree of awareness stays with you. And it stays with you and stays with you, and then a dream starts up that awareness is right there, and that makes it turns it into a lucid dream. So it literally just happens. You can, it's just like you don't even have to try. That is, of course, the most predictable, but probably the least popular, because you have to do a fairly long meditation. But anyway, that's probably one thing I'll say for now. Okay, so Jasmine actually has she has the exact, she's March 2021 AGP starting around 1 hour and 14 minutes. Okay, there you go. Of course, this would, you will have access to this recording only if you were in AGP at that time. So back in March 2021. But I'm happy to repeat some of the highlights. So if we have time in December AGP, or if not December, next year, then we will cover it. So I want to stop here because there's a lot of stuff. I do want to quickly talk about a couple of announcements, and then I'll open it up for any closing comments that anybody has. So, of course, this AGP is unusual. We're having it early in the month, and we're having it on a Saturday. So I'd be curious for any kind of feedback on how this is different, just based on the timing, and if this time works better for you or does not work better for you. So I'd just be curious to hear any comments on that. And you don't have to do that now. You can post it on the AGP WhatsApp group, or you can email me. Next AGP is going to be Monday, December 12th. So by then I'll be back from my trip to India, and we will tackle with more fascinating topics. What other announcements? I think that's really the only major announcement. Also, of course, the Just Be Study group is always, they meeting. There was a meeting just yesterday. So check in with Cindy on that, and she usually posts it on the AGP group. So I would encourage everyone to actually tune into that. There's always good discussion from what I hear. Okay, so that's, I'll stop there. Let me open it up for any closing questions or comments. Glad to see some folks from further East Coast and elsewhere, including Australia, hanging in there. Good. Happy to see everyone. Picking a time for this is always tricky because, works for one person doesn't work for somebody else. So it's always trying to balance these things out. But I really appreciate everybody hanging in there. And also, of course, the recordings are available to you, and I see lots of you are really paying attention, listening to those things, and there's a lot. You go back and you can listen to it. You'll pick up many new things, and of course, you can meditate many times to this guided meditations. Very useful. Okay, let's wrap it up here then. Thank you all so much. It's absolutely awesome to be talking about these things, and really, and of course, going beyond just talking. We're swimming, we're swimming in these things, and that's always very uplifting, inspiring. I hope you find it useful. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend and coming week, coming month. Boundless love and light to all of you. Take care. Bye now.